folks, it's Laura with Raintree Nursery. And this is the video that all of you newer growers have been waiting for. If you feel like you're new to planting food-bearing plants and you kind of wonder what you should know before you plant your plants or even place your order, this is the video for you. We're going to explain the tips and tricks and research that you'll want to do to understand your growing conditions and the plants that are going to be well suited and easy to grow in your area. Let's get started. So you've decided to add some edible trees and bushes and fruiting plants to your landscape. Congratulations! The first thing you want to think about is what kind of plants are going to do well in your area that are going to be easy to grow and productive. And in order to make that decision, you have to understand a little bit about the climate conditions in your location. So the first piece of information that you want to have under your belt, and most folks understand this, is your USDA zone. Your zone has to do with the coldest average temperature that your plants are likely to have to live through each winter. It's only about cold hardiness. It's not about heat. It's not about water. It's only about the coldest average temperature that you get each winter. It's easy to find this piece of information online. There are all kinds of websites where you can put in your zip code and you can find your USDA cold hardiness zone. The second piece of information is the opposite of the cold hardiness zone, and that is your annual heat units, also called growing degree days. It basically is an accumulation of how hot for how long your region gets during the summer. And this is really important information because there are some plants that take a long time to ripen. If you don't have enough heat units in your region to fully ripen the fruit from these plants, then you don't want to put these plants in your design. There are also some regions that get quite warm for a long time and certain plants that don't like that kind of heat. So once again, it helps to inform what you choose to put in your design based on how hot your region is and for how long. The American Horticulture Society has a wonderful map that shows these growing degree day areas. They also call them heat units. The map is several years old, but it will give you a great idea of where you stand. Your area might be slightly warmer now, but the general outline is what you're after. The next piece of information is chill hours. This is kind of a hidden gem of information. Many trees need a certain amount of chill hours to rest when they're dormant before they can wake up and bloom and fruit reliably. A chill hour is a number of hours between the temperatures of 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And Oregon State University has a wonderful national map of regional chill hours. Matching up chill hours is important. If you live in a low chill area, you want to make sure to pick low chill varieties of the plants that you want to grow. The next piece of information is yearly rainfall totals. It's important to understand how much rain your area gets because that will give you a good idea of how much rain will come free from the sky and how much you're going to have to supply via irrigation. The next piece of information that's really valuable is to understand what types of fruiting plants are easy to grow in your area. And that is a wonderful way to connect with your local Master Gardeners group. You can ask your plant ambassadors from Raintree Nursery. There are certain categories of plants that just do well in certain areas of the country and may struggle in other areas for a variety of reasons. Understanding that easy to grow group, that's a leg up on success. And lastly, you want to look at disease resistance. Different areas of the country have different disease problems. Understanding what diseases are endemic or common in your area can allow you to either avoid certain categories of plants that are susceptible to those kinds of diseases, or pick varieties that are particularly disease resistant to diseases that you will find in your area. Once you have all six of these pieces of information, you will be armed to start making really wise choices. You can get this information from us at Raintree Nursery. You can talk to your plant ambassadors, or you could reach out to your county agricultural extension office. Then they can give you fabulous local information about all six of these pieces of information. Now you know a little bit about the area you're going to be growing your plants in. The next thing you want to think about is, what do you want to eat? If you find that you regularly have apples in your refrigerator and you like to take an apple for lunch every day, then you should probably see if apples would grow well in your area. So assess, what do you buy at the store when it comes to fruit? It's also really interesting to all start thinking about, how much money do I spend on what I'm buying at the store? It might seem like food bearing plants are expensive, but then when you start assessing how much money you spend at the store buying these fresh fruits and over years, and you compare that to the cost of the plants, I think you will see very quickly that you're going to come out on the better end of the deal. Also, if you have kids, do you think about their snack habits? Wouldn't you like to be giving them fresh fruits instead of a lot of the prepared items that come from the store? And of course, that goes for us too. Would I rather be snacking on an apple than something that comes out of a bag? I certainly would. So, making sure that I'm assessing my snack habits, and of course the nutrition that comes from fresh fruit straight from the garden, those are also really important aspects of choosing what you're going to grow. And lastly, what are you going to do with this fruit? Are you going to snack on it fresh? Or are you trying to find things that you can make preserves out of? Things that you can't find at the store. Old fashioned things like quince and medlar. Yes, there's things you can eat fresh, but there's also these amazing ancient varieties of things that you can make into smoothies, that you can freeze and make into preserves. You can make salsas, you can make sauces, you can make fruit leather, you can make gifts. There are all kinds of things that you can do with your bounty besides eating it fresh out of the garden. And what you decide you want to do with it informs what you plant. Once we've worked through climate conditions and you've decided what kinds of things you think you'd like to grow and eat, then we have to start talking about the area that you have to plant in. Do your site assessment. How much land do you have to work with? Is it a small backyard garden? Is it a 20-acre homestead? Or is it a patio in an apartment building? That can dictate the size of the plants that you buy. How much sun and shade does your area get? You can grow a nice garden in full shade. You can grow a nice garden in full sun, but not all the plants that like sun will work in shade, and vice versa. So knowing what percentage of 6 hours a day or more of full sun do you have, that will help you inform which plants you pick and where you put them. If you have a pretty shady area to work with, can you change that? Can you take out a fence? Could you take out a tree or two? Or not change anything at all? Can you make changes? Another thing to think about is, what are the conditions of your soil? What is your pH? Is it clay? Is it sandy? Is it loamy? You can do a soil test and find out these pieces of information. You can always add organic matter to buffer certain extreme conditions, but knowing what the conditions are that you are working with to start with can help you avoid making costly mistakes like planting blueberries in highly alkaline soil. And of course, water. We'll use blueberries as an example of water. Is water easy to find on your site? Is it easy to get a hose to your newly planted area? Some plants, like blueberries, like lots of water, and most other plants, after they get established for a year or two, can be pretty drought resistant. How is your water access? And lastly, if you don't have any land to work with at all, if you live in an apartment building or you live in a rental and you can't plant anything in ground, how else can you plant your plants? Can you plant them in containers? And nice big containers, like half whiskey barrels, can have a tree and a bush and maybe a couple of draping plants in them. You can plant a lot more densely in containers and get away with getting a nice yield, even if you don't have land. You can also take a look at working with local pea patches, or if you're friends with a neighbor who has land and you don't, perhaps you put a garden in on their land and together you share the bounty. And now that you've assessed your local climate conditions and you've assessed your site, it's time to assess yourself. What is your skill level when it comes to growing edible plants? There is no shame here. I like to say that we all start at the beginning, myself included. If you are a novice beginner, have you ever grown a fruiting tree or a bush or a ground cover or worked on those kinds of plants with a relative? Were they successful? Were you happy with how it all went? Or were they not as productive as you thought they could have been? Do you know much about pruning? And are you good at assessing the health of a plant? Now, if you are not good at any of those things or you don't have experience with it, that's okay, because there is the internet. And I encourage you to spend a lot of time using this incredibly valuable resource. There is so much information that was not available to growers even 30 years ago about diseases, about plants that grow well in certain areas, about varieties of plants. I expect that you will spend a lot of time on the internet researching the plants that you choose, getting that information under your belt so you know a little bit about what to expect. And another great way to build your skills before you even put a plant in the ground is to start volunteering at some of your local public gardens or your public pea patches, or make friends with master gardener groups in your area, or find out if there are local fruit clubs. There are all kinds of hidden groups that you might not know about until you use the internet to start looking for them, where you can go and volunteer, build your skills at the same time that you are giving back to your community, and that is a real win-win. And lastly, there is no time like the present to start. Once you've done your research with all of the information that you've gathered, you can start making your planting plan. Piece of graph paper, making drawings. Sometimes I cut out little pieces of colored paper and use them on a graph paper to get my spacing right. You want to make sure to leave space so that airflow can come through your garden plan. Once you've got your plan in place, then you can start preparing your soil. And it's quite inexpensive to be selective about the areas that you prepare. Once you know where the plants are going to go, you can start digging, adding amendments. You can dig your hole. You can put raw kitchen scraps or manure into the holes and then cover them with some soil so they can compost in place. Because there's that beautiful old saying, the best soil is under the compost pile. And if you make a bunch of little compost piles that end up being your planting holes, then you know you're going to be creating rich habitat for your new plants. You can spend the rest of this year after you've made your plan and your purchases, getting your site ready to introduce those plants to your land in the best way possible, having your holes dug so that when the plants arrive, you can soak them and put them in the ground and watch them grow. You'll both grow together. And that is what I love about planning and planting fruit-bearing gardens. Thanks for joining us. It's Laura with Raintree Nursery. Happy planting.